Thank you very much for this inspiring dive into philosophy. I think it always connects us with the big questions. So we're getting close to the end. So it's now my pleasure to invite Anastasia Giannakidou, Frank J. McLoraine Professor of Linguistics and the College, University of Chicago, who will provide closing remarks and will present next steps.
Hello, everybody. Yep. So it's great. Let me, after this wonderful discussion that we've had, I was thinking I had prepared a few things, but I will start by summarizing there. But before I do that, I wanted to truly thank the organizers of this conference, specifically Alexandra Mitsotakis, for the initiative and for the idea. So let us all... It falls on the shoulders of the last person to acknowledge this. And I also wanted to acknowledge everybody else who made this event possible. I think everybody who helped really, truly was very engaged and very devoted. And I think I speak on behalf of almost everybody in saying that we enjoy today a full day of eudaimonia. It was a day where our spirits were high and our minds were engaged in a number of really deep questions, the answers to which we only begin to, speculate. Although some answers, I think, are relatively obvious, and I will start with those. So, at the end, I wanted to summarize, as I said, and the last discussion was very illustrative. So I will start with a number of conclusions. So I think we can all conclude that we know, or that we have a certain certainty, that there is a thing such as human nature, and that it comes with certain qualities, with certain predicates. And by accepting that there is this thing that we understand and acknowledge as human nature, we then need to answer the question, is the artificial intelligence or the artificial entity anything that can resemble a human or a person? So this is a question that came up several times during the discussion, and I wanted to take up on this question. Before I do that, another obvious conclusion was, and again I think that conclusion is illustrative when it comes to answering the question of whether the artificial entity is a person. So the other conclusion was that we cannot have a friendship with an artificial being, that they cannot be a friend. However, we use the word friend, and language is deceiving in this way, in this case and in many other cases, in that we use the word friend as a metaphor, and metaphor relies crucially on the anti-veridicality of its content. So when I say you're my sunshine, I do not literally say that you're my sunshine. In fact, you're my sunshine presupposes that you're not a sunshine. So when we say that an artificial entity is a friend, and we use this metaphorically, and I'm convinced that we're using this metaphorically, that entails or presupposes, as I said, that it is not, in fact, a friend. So I'm not going to continue on the discussion of friendship. It was a very interesting discussion. I also wanted to touch on the issue of transhumanism, but let me start now by thinking, given that we have reached a number of things that I think we know. Let me also grab some water. It's the end, and it's a little dry with the air condition, so we need a little bit of liquid, as in antiquity, to go with the thought. So, let me now, then, I don't want to keep you for long. I know that we're all tired, but I really think that it is now time to put everything together and really ask the question, in what sense is the artificial intelligence not and intelligence of a person, okay? And everything else that that entails. And I will start by answering this question by thinking of what the human intelligence is, okay? Now, and I want to bring this ancestral wisdom into what a human intelligence is and start with, the understanding of psyche and what we call sometimes the mind in English, or cognition. That's another word that neuroscientists and linguists and psychologists use. So what is it? What is human cognition? What is the human intelligence, such that the intelligence of the mechanical is not human intelligence? So the human intelligence contains a number of things, the most prominent of which, according to Aristotle, is logos. Okay? And I wanted to bring up, I'm surprised that the word logos didn't come up this today. I think it's what characterizes, I don't think that, Aristotle does, and I think we do adopt it. So logos has a number of components, one of which is language. So as a language person, I like to emphasize that first. So logos contains language, and it also contains rationality. So it is the underlying principle of rationality that beings with language have. At the same time, logos implies moral judgment. Specifically, it implies judgment to the good and the exercise of that judgment to the good, which we generally call virtue. Okay, that's another word that I had hoped would have come up more in the discussion. But again, these are three very important aspects of the human cognition, of the human intelligence, which, again, I repeat them, it's language, is rationality, the ability to think rationally and draw conclusions, and the ability to form moral judgments, and judgments, more generally. Now, all of these, miraculously, this is discussed a lot in Aristotle's Politics in Book 1, where he claims very clearly that logos, as being language and rationality, serve the judgment towards the good and ultimately towards the fulfillment of human nature, which is, apart from eudaimonia, also to exist in a polis. Okay? So the ability to have logos entails that ultimately we are these beings that live in a polis and create, collective existence. We fulfill our freedom and we exercise our rationality and our judgment within a polis. It's what we generally think of as being social beings. Okay, so we can think of these as the characteristics. I mean, this is very brief, but like the basic characteristics of what it is to be humanly intelligent, what it means to be a person. And then when we ask the question of, how much of that does the machine have? Okay, the answer should be obvious, I think, to everyone, that it's, very little or none. So the machine does not have language, and it doesn't have any kind of internal representation of language. So I do emphasize here that by language, we don't mean just the social behavior. So the number of things, like right now I'm practicing language, so I'm exercising a particular activity that involves language. I could say that I'm languaging, okay? But language is primarily a type of knowledge. John Searle famously, so some of these questions arose when the Turing machines, the first machines came up, and the idea, like, can machines think? And John Searle, a philosopher of language from Berkeley, he offered the famous Chinese room argument, which was the argument that wanted to show that language actually contains internal representations. And the argument, I'll sketch it very briefly, is as follows. So we have some person inside a room. That person does not speak Chinese or know Chinese, but he's given a set of symbols, okay, of Chinese into English, the transformations, and people outside the room, they give him like Chinese words or expressions within those symbols, and that person then, by looking at the list, they can translate those into English. And Searle then raises the question, does that person know Chinese? Okay, does he really translate, Chinese into English because he knows Chinese? And the answer Searle gives is no, because there is no internalized knowledge. The person that translates in the Chinese room simply follows an algorithm which has particular steps, and it is procedural. And you follow those steps and you end up with something that looks like the product of knowledge. But it is not knowledge, it is a mimesis of knowledge. It is a semblance of knowledge. It's something that looks like knowledge, but it's not really knowledge. And I would say that a lot of the behavior, what we observed here today, like a lot of what the large language models or the ChatGPTs or any other kinds of machines do is they mimic knowledge and they mimic humanness, but they're not truly human. The question, however, is like, why is it so attractive? And I think this question was raised a little bit by Professor Tarsioulas in his description of transhumanism. But why is it so attractive to think of them as humans? Okay, because it is. For the Elon Musks of the world, it is definitely very attractive. For others into the science fiction literature, it is also extremely attractive to see the machines with anthropomorphic attributes. One could say at this point that maybe it has to do with the fact that, humans generally project. For instance, we do attribute human-like properties often to animals. And I think this is also an interesting question, the answer to which I think is positive. The question is, can we, are animals persons? Okay, so that is one question. Animals do not have logos. Okay, they don't have, so logos is part of the soul. There are different levels in the soul, according to Plato and Aristotle, and animals lack that, although animals do have other properties that the human soul has, specifically phronesis, for example. But in any case, the question is, can we have friendships with animals? And I believe, a good answer would be that yes, because, animals are living beings, and one, could imaginably understand some relation that could be akin to a friendship to an animal. So for some people then, the transition from an animal to the machine is done via a thought that says, okay, well, we can have relations with non-humans in this way, and so we view the machine in a human-like way. But I think it's a general issue, why would we feel that we want to do that? Okay, in the interest of time, and I don't want to bore you, and I'm happy to answer more questions if there are any. I also wanted to say a few things about education and how there was an education panel earlier, and what the role of AI can be in education. I wanted to go back when it comes to education to this idea of Plutarch, actually, in Περί του Ακούειν, which is one of his, we all know Plutarch from his biographies, Avi Paralleli, but he was actually a philosopher, and he wrote a lot of material about teaching and about education. And so in this specific treatise, Περί του Ακούειν, he says that education is not like filling a bottle, okay? So it's not, so the human mind is not like an angion that needs to be filled, a bottle to be filled with stuff and education and things to remember, but it is rather like wood, like firewood, ως per ύλης, we have to understand it as some kind of wood that requires kindling and rekindling so that it then develops a thrust, a kind of, a thrust for discovery, έβρεσης ορμητική, and όρεξη επί της αληθείας, so, and a kind of appetite for truth. So that is what the human mind needs, and what the human mind needs to be fed and nurtured when it comes to how it can be educated. So when we think of the AI and how it is used in the classroom, the AI approaches the learning or the teaching more as a process of filling the bottle. Okay, so we ask the AI, what is this and what is that, and it gives us certain answers, and those answers do not, they are answers for which we didn't think. They didn't satisfy any kind of, they satisfy the curiosity, but they didn't satisfy the ormi evritikin, so that thrust for discovery and answer. So it is very passive. It creates a kind of passivity that I think ultimately abolishes the very process of thinking. Okay, because thinking does involve discovery, it does involve asking questions, it does involve what was said earlier, wonder and awe and puzzle and like, oh my God, is that even about very basic things? We should all become like children a little bit, asking these questions about mysteries of the world. And the mysteries are typically, I think, in the very mundane and everyday things. But in any case, so I think that we need to think of what the machine does and that it kind of abolishes thinking. So thinking requires a kind of creativity, it requires asking the question, and I think, above all, it also requires uncertainty. Okay, we do want, when we ask questions, we ask them because we are in a state of ignorance, or at least partial ignorance, or we are in a state of like not fully knowing. So when we think of trying to get answers to those questions, that thinking involves steps that contain in them uncertainty. And so the way, so I am a little, cautious or careful when we say things like we use the AI in the classroom. I feel that in some ways it can replace thinking because it deprives the student or the teacher, this is also a kind of task for the teacher, of the ability to raise the questions anew, to think of answers that you never thought before, and to be left with a certain, uncertainty about what exactly the correct answer should be. Okay, so still, since I'm out of time, I will try then to come up with some ideas about, what to do as we move forward. My ideas are like, I will identify here a couple of words. So one word is the word reflect, okay? So we need to reflect. We need to reflect about what AI is. Is it intelligence? I don't believe it's intelligence because intelligence contains internal states, and the machine does not have internal states. It lacks logos, it lacks internal states, it lacks language. So we need to reflect, however, on how it can be used. It is a tool, and that reflection, can, have ideas, but that reflection, this is what we've been doing today. We've been doing reflection, and that reflection is to be done collectively, from multiple perspectives, from people who care, from people who have ideas and stakes, and we need, more events like this, and we need basically every teacher or educator or researcher or philosopher that thinks along these lines to reflect and not take things for granted. I think another that emerged was regulate. We definitely need to regulate, and it came up in the morning sessions a lot. I was very impressed with the Prime Minister's comments about the need to regulate predatory behavior on the internet, and it is very important to think about this regulation. Regulation doesn't mean abolish, but regulation with reflection can be something that, again, if it's guided by virtue and human flourishing, then we know what the purpose is and what it is that we're going to when we want to regulate. The third that I see as a conclusion here is resist. So, reflect, regulate, and resist. Resist the temptation to see artificial intelligence as a fellow human. Resist the temptation to be good in a completely abstract and, narcissistic way, in which, okay, well, we need to be good to it because it looks like us or it is a human. No, it is a tool. In fact, Josiah Ober, who was mentioned earlier, has this understanding of AI as being a kind of artificial slave. So resist the temptation to think of it as our companion, and resist the temptation to think of it as something inevitable. That is also the Baroness's comment from this morning. Like, it is not, the way it will evolve is not inevitable. The way it will evolve depends on us, because we created it. We are its creators. It is less than we think, really. It is not more than we think. It looks more when we just don't have an understanding of what we as human beings are, and when we're just impressed by superficial tasks that, that it can perform just because it is in its nature to perform those tasks. But otherwise, generally, this is my advice for the future: reflect, regulate, and resist. And thank you all for being here, for listening, for thinking together. And I'm open to questions if there are any. Otherwise, I will just let you go. I know everybody's tired. Mm-hmm.